Suits, you got 3 burning things we got to get to here right away, right off the hop.
Well, absolutely. I was listening in, Maz, and listening to the show leading up to this for about an hour, and I've got 3 things right off the top. First of all, when I played in Regina, I used to go to Pats games all the time and watch Mike Sillinger. I mean, you guys just talking about Mike and joining the team, and I just thought, man, I remember just like getting up out of my seat watching Sillinger play for the Pats. He was awesome. We a lot of the team would go and get Pats tickets and go watch him. So that was one. The other was, I love it, and I'm going to steal it, and I'm not sure who said it, but a brick wall moment. Who gets the quote on the brick wall moment? There's something about Noah Zerr or something. This could be a brick wall moment. With Noah Zerr running into somebody.
Appreciate the shout out, Suits. No, it's because I think I smacked into someone playing rec hockey that was a little bit larger, and yeah, it's like hitting a brick wall. It hurts. Oy.
Well, I can't give you credit during a football telecast, but I will definitely be stealing the brick wall moment when someone runs into an old lineman or something like that. And the final one, Maz. The final one for me is I'm looking at the clock behind you on the podcast.
Yes.
And I see it's kind of like Kramer. You're in the nexus of the universe, frozen at 20 to 12. What's going on with the clock behind you?
Well, there's no significance to that, Suits. I would love to, if I had a 3-layer deep answer that would make me seem intelligent, I'd go into that right now, but I'm just going to have to go with, that's what I got from Amazon, so that's what we're going to go with.
Okay. Yeah, I was just looking and going, is it just me or is that clock frozen behind him? How many times do we do that on podcasts, though, when we're watching a news podcast or whatever it may be, and you're looking at all the stuff behind the guy that's talking? I love when people set up their favorite books and stuff in behind you, like, I go, oh, you didn't read that book.
Yeah, so right here, there's a small book section in this thing that it's not 50 volumes deep. Like, who are we trying to fool here? But I totally get it when you're like, dude, there's no way you've ever read that many books. That is not a real background. And look at Curtis there. He's in a log cabin apparently, with the wood behind up there.
Nice and cozy. Might get myself a fire going and whatnot. And also, a broken clock is still right twice a day, Suits. Keep that in mind.
Nice. Very nice.
It's another Curtis quip. Brought to you by,
stop. Hey, Suits, stop encouraging them. That, like, this is getting out of control. Then they're going to want their own segments. Then they're going to want their own hour, which is fine on Friday because then we can leave early. It's great. All right. So the CFL tampering window officially, because no one's been tampering, not a text message has been sent or a phone call made since the season ended, officially starts this weekend. The Ed Hervey rule for CFL free agents. And I know that the Riders have a bunch of guys that aren't signed yet. Jeremy O'Day said some people have offers in front of them and some guys are going to go to market and test things. There's a bunch of the top CFL free agents. Let's get into it with you. It's your money, Suits. You're putting this thing all together. Who should, in your opinion, we be spending money on, according to you?
Well, the price that you have to spend for a player, especially in certain positions, and I'll get to it in a second on why I think this way, but guys that are not, let me start with guys that are not on my list. And the guys that are not on my list, as good of players as they are, and these are 3 of maybe the best players in the league: Gino Lewis, Kenny Lawler, and Wynn McManus. If I'm with the Riders, those 3 guys, unless the market shifts or something dramatic happens where their price drops, those guys will be at the top of the pecking order. They're going to be at the top of the list for a lot of teams. It's very, very tempting. You think about Gino Lewis. I mean, who wouldn't want him on their team? I mean, he's a good teammate. He's good in the room, from all I've heard. And we see what he does on the field. He's a monster out there. I mean, he's one of the guys that you look at and you think, sometimes it looks like he's a man playing against boys because he's just can be that dominant. Wynton McManus, we saw what he did in the Grey Cup. Kenny Lawler, one of the best receivers, just straight hands and contested catches in the league. So those guys aren't on my list, and the reason being is that they will be at the top of the market, and price wise, it'll probably be one team that is so tempted that they decide it's worth it to pay that top dollar. What it does though is it shifts your whole budget, where there are guys that I think become way not more valuable than them as players, but work into your budget and your system and will benefit your team all together as a package. Not just, who's the best player? I don't care how much it is. I'm paying for that guy. Because that to me gets you in trouble. And we've seen that, one big free agent receiver doesn't necessarily change the fortunes of your team. It just doesn't seem to work that way. So here's a couple of guys, and I'm going to start on the line of scrimmage because you know how I feel about the line of scrimmage being, should be your priority. I think Jake Sherezna from the Argos he's a free agent still.
Yes.
We'll check the market. Now, he may slide into that top category too. I just think over his last couple of years, he may slide into that area where he's too expensive, but he would be on my list. But O-lineman wise, Isaiah Cage in Toronto, Liam Dobson in Winnipeg, free agents, and Calgary, Sean McEwen is also on the free agent market. So those are three all-star caliber offensive linemen. And even if the Riders are looking at their O-line and saying, our starting five is pretty good, and I think you could make an argument there. I think you need seven. You need seven really good ones. Now, you're not going to bring in a Sean McEwen and then bench him. So you have to see how he fits in the system in the lineup. But those guys when you're looking at the line of scrimmage, to me. And another one, and this is an American. A lot of the guys on my list are Canadians, by the way. But an American on my list is Mike Rose. Mike Rose was just cut by the Calgary Stampeders, and Mike had one more year, Maz, on his contract. So he wasn't about to become a free agent. And Calgary said, "Well, he's going to market anyway. Let's cut him loose and let him talk to other teams, see where he lands." He had one more year on his deal. So they're clearly shifting in their approach. Mike has led their team the last 2 years in sacks. And, I can see why Dave Dickinson probably parted with him, because I don't think his back half of the season was up to his own standards. I mean, he would be the only guy that could answer that. But having said that, I look at it and think it wasn't his standard in the back half, but a new team, to prove a point, that chip on your shoulder, all of those things would kick in for Mike Rose. I think that shift and that change of, area code would be good for him.
So Mike Rose and James Waters both released on Monday, and on the show on Monday, I said, "Hey, I like both those guys." Waters came, then left and went back to the NFL, then came back again. To me, I've always liked them as players. Calgary has had a knack, though. They've been very good, much like Belichick, the Wally Buono era. They know exactly when to get rid of a guy, which made me think, because you had said he's got one more year left on his deal. Calgary's got enough turmoil and change going on. I'm like, okay, well, what's up with Mike Rose if they're letting him go? Because keep in mind, if he came to Saskatchewan, I agree, there's enough surrounding pieces, he could just fit right in and get back to form. Because it seemed like last year he was just trying to do too much to cover for all the other problems that they had. And maybe that's why it didn't work. That's my only question about Mike Rose. I would take him. I really like what he does. He played under Mace. They would know each other. So that's intriguing.
Yeah, and they would know each other. And the other thing is that Corey Mace can answer a lot of the questions that you have about Mike Rose by watching the video. You know, he can watch the second half of the season, and then don't judge him just on those 6 or 7, 8 games. Don't judge him just on those 8 games. Judge him on his whole body of work, and then determine whether or not this is a getting older thing, or did the play drop off because, as you mentioned, he was trying to do too much. You know, trying to take 3 gaps in the O line rather than just his own gap. Those kind of things, and that's what got him in trouble at times. But the production kind of has dropped off, and Corey Mace can answer a lot of those questions by looking at the video. He knows him well, so he knows what kind of guy he is. Every time I talk to him on Zoom, he seems like a great teammate. He's a bit of a character, which sometimes you need in a locker room, that guy that has a lot of fun and, you know, messes with people. But yeah, I would definitely talk to him. I would definitely kick the tires on him. He's a very skilled D lineman that you could play both inside and out. So I like him. A couple other guys, Tyrell Ford in Winnipeg.
Yeah, game changer, ratio changer, just so good and getting better.
All-star, and we're just scratching the surface. Like, just scratching the surface. And passport aside, yes, he would be ideal. And most of my guys on my list are Canadians. He would be ideal in that regard. You know, if you're gonna sign a free agent and maybe pay a little more than you want to get that free agent, I think that's a safer bet than trying to find a young college Canadian, you know, DB or receiver, whatever it may be. It's less of a risk to find DeMonte Coxey or an Ontario Wilson, who is a rookie that makes an impact in his rookie season. Remember Dalton Schoen in his first year in Winnipeg, rookie. You know, statistically, when you look at his measurables, like 40 and things like that, you're not going to be overly blown away by him. But what a great receiver. He fit into our league. He figured it out and just made a huge impact his rookie year. I think your chances as a GM and coach of finding a young, rookie, hungry American receiver or DB or linebacker, maybe even offensive tackles, it's much less of a risk because of the sheer numbers. The sheer numbers in the States with all the guys that are coming out of colleges. So, you know, if you're going to go into the free agent market, to me, it's guys like this. It's Tunde Adeleke. It's Royce Metier. Yeah. Those 2 guys could be your safety for the next decade. Yeah. That takes a receiver. Both of those guys can cover man-to-man, so you can blitz with them and move them down. Both of them have great range, and both are Canadian. That's a biggie. Tyrell Ford, as we mentioned. Robbie Smith is an interesting one to me too in Toronto. Again, probably not on a lot of lists, but has become more than just a consistent Canadian defensive lineman. He's a guy that can make an impact, and did in the Grey Cup when Toronto won, when it was played in Saskatchewan. If you remember, it was Robbie Smith. He got a penalty and then blocked a kick that determine the outcome. So I mentioned the offensive linemen, most of which were Canadian, except for Isaiah Cage. The other guy I might kick the tires on, and we've talked about this, Barney and I did, Maz, I'd be interested in your idea too here. Adam Bighill wants to keep playing. Now, Jameer Thurman is the starting linebacker in Saskatchewan, and Jameer Thurman provides the leadership necessary. But I told a story about Nick Hebler back in '87 when he joined our locker room. And I think Adam Bighill would be that kind of guy. You can still have Jameer as a leader on your defense. Adam won't step on his toes. But Adam knows the caramel secret with why Winnipeg has been to the Grey Cup 5 straight years. So it'd be interesting to talk to him.
Suits? Okay. As a crazed Rider fan who runs on a lot of emotion and not a lot of logic, that's 90% of the people that are listening and watching. The Andrew Harris becoming our running back coach, I needed about 36 hours to completely take in and kind of be okay. Now, keep in mind, Harris hasn't played. He's a year and some removed. It's a coach. It's a thing. That may be a lot to ask for us to kind of absorb an Adam Bighill announcement at this time. Where, hey, don't get me wrong. Love the guy. Just there's not enough time of him not being a Bomber. And he wrecked us for a lot of years. Okay. Like, keep in mind, like, if it was somebody else, like if you're like, oh, it's this guy from Ottawa. Okay, fine. No emotions attached. A lot of us may have a tough time swallowing an Adam Bighill one.
Well, Andrew Harris. Andrew Harris, Maz, as you mentioned, is going to make a big impact, and a similar impact that an Adam Bighill would, except for Adam could be on the field helping you too. And
yes. Football ability wise, this is just emotions and us getting over ourselves to be like, he was the enemy. He was one of the most hated enemies on the Bombers. Who there's a lot of stuff going around online, and not a lot of people are feeling sorry if the Bombers get like lit up here in free agency and lose some guys because the dynasty is kind of falling apart. Like, they get rid of Wolotarski this week. They've cut Adam Bighill. Is Dalton Schoen going to resign? People are saying, well, Schoen's going to sign with the Riders. There's a lot of change there. And Jeremy O'Day, in his comments that, Dave had earlier, says with all these one-year contracts, you can change your team in a year because you can make over your roster in a big way.
Yeah, you can. Awesome. And there's two receivers, by the way, on my list that I maybe buried the headline. Justin McInnes is a free agent, and Justin McInnes is a Canadian. And again, if you're going to pay a little extra for a receiver, I think it's less of a risk to find a rookie young receiver down south and bring in as a free agent and pay a little bit more for a established all-star Canadian receiver like Justin McInnes. That to me is the better way to go. Dalton Schoen is also on my list, but he would easily be in the category of Kenny Lawler and Geno Lewis, except for his injury situation. If his injury situation dropped his price because people were unsure, then I would definitely talk to him, because with all the changes in Winnipeg, who knows? Maybe he's looking for a new one. And I have a couple of wild card ones. One is Reggie White in Montreal, big target, and just sort of was late in the season there, but I was intrigued by his abilities. And Janarian Grant, the returner in Toronto, and there were two reasons for Janarian Grant. One, the player. I mean, awesome. Now, Mario Alford is going to become a free agent. So I think the organization should be, just to cover their base, should be talking to Janarian Grant in this window and saying, hey, what would it take? How would you feel about playing in front of 30 plus every single home game in a beautiful facility? And that's not to disparage or discredit or not show respect for Mario Alford. But if he becomes a free agent and is testing the market, well, okay, that's fine. You can test the market, but we're also going to test as an organization the market on another top-end returner. And Janarian Grant is certainly that.
When we were talking about Bighill, I thought of the very amusing situation of, if Bighill comes here, that'll be Adam Bighill, Solomon Eliminian, and G.Y. Simon, who are all in their prime with BC and who all would probably retire with the Riders. And I'm like, that'd be a fun trio to have around our Ring of Honor, right? So
that is it's a great point. I mean, it is a great point, because look what G-Roy did in the Grey Cup year. The Grey Cup year in 13, G-Roy Simon, the story is fantastic. And one day have G-Roy on the show and have him tell the story. But he goes in the huddle and tells Darian, well, you guys talk to Darian on a weekly basis, so ask Darian about it. And what G-Roy said when he came back in the huddle during the game and said, I got him on a corner or whatever it was, and he just blew off whatever play they were going to run and trusted G-Roy Simon, and he was a huge contributor in their Grey Cup year. So that's what I mean about an Adam Bighill. It's a great point. And Barron Simpson had a lot of football left in him too, and sometimes when you change, and Adam's been very cordial and professional in talking about how the Bombers are going in a different direction. But in his heart, in his soul, to the core of him, he wants to show that whole organization that he's got more football left in him.
Nice. I'll just quickly run through some of the names here. You touched on it. The Rider free agents. Now, there may be offers in front of them. There may not be. Christian Albright, Mario Alford, Adam Auclair, Canadian linebacker, had a great second half of the season. It was a bit of a game. He was a bit of a game changer there. Is that a guy that you think we should try and bring back, Suits?
Yes.
Okay. Philip Blake, often injured and up there in age. If they move on from him, are you shocked?
No, see what the market brings, and there are other O-linemen. Again, that's the Janarian Grant discussion. There are other top-end O-linemen that will become available in free agency that you could say, we want you back, Philip, but we could also sign this O-lineman from Calgary or wherever at a little bit less. So, that's where the market will help you make that decision.
On the D-line, Miles Brown and Brian Cox. Both had good years last year.
Mm-hmm. I like them both. Again, I think you can wait and see where they kind of land. I know Micah Johnson, I think, is still out there, and so is Anthony Lanier. And
Anthony Lanier.
Yeah. So with Lanier and Miles Brown, if I'm in Jeremy O'Day's shoes, I probably want at least one of those guys back. Both can contribute inside and out, and can be dominant. So I'd want to get at least one or both of those two back.
Peter Godber played well, injured last year. Amari Henderson. If they move on from Amari, I think a lot of us are getting Frankie Hickson. They signed another running back earlier this week, Trent Penix. So I don't know if that means Frankie hit, is that because AJ Ouellette? We've discovered some running back talent. We also have Arquel Armstead under contract for another year. Godfrey Onyeka, Cozy Onyeka, Shea Patterson, and Mitch Pickton. Two loyal soldiers. Been here through some thick and some thin.
Yeah.
Does Patterson come back to be a camp arm? Because is Mayer going to be anointed number 2, or is this a legitimate dogfight where everything is open?
Well, I think knowing Corey Mace a little bit and having many conversations with him, that he will make sure that everyone understands that it is a competition always, and you're as good as sort of your last week of practice or your last game. And that's just pro football. That's not one approach different than another. That should be what it's always about. Competition will bring the best out of everybody, always, and the guys know that. But you make a great point on Shea Patterson. To me, ideally, you want your number one that you believe can win you a championship. They have that in Trevor. Your number 2 has got to win you a few games during the regular season. Having an experienced one in Jake is excellent. Number 3's got to be your future. So and your short yardage guy. Ideally both. Mm-hmm. And if number 3, if you are after, how long have they had Shea there now? 3-4 years.
I think this is coming up would be his third season.
Third season. So they've had lots of time to, evaluate what he is now and try to imagine and foresee what he will become. And that to me is the decision that's got to be made on Shea. Is he a guy that you envision one day could win you a championship or win any team a championship? Like, you know, think of it like that. Like if this guy is good enough to win with and take you to the promised land, then he's your number 3 because he's your future. He's young. He's going to keep learning under the veterans ahead of him. And he becomes your short yardage guy in the short term. But in the long term, you believe that in 5 years, he's going to be your starting quarterback. I think that's what your number 3's got to be. And that's why you go and get a young one that has probably been overlooked in the NFL, and you start to groom them and then see them in your system, see their work ethic, see how they handle adversity, see all those boxes that you got to check. And if you're checking them all and you got your future guy, then absolutely you get him signed back.
All right. And then we'll end on this. I think a lot of us that are Rider fans, and it's not just because it's a homegrown thing, but every time Mitch Pickton's ever been put in a football game, all he does is what he's supposed to do. Catch balls, block, do the right thing proper. But I think a lot of us think he's never been given fully the opportunity to, you know, have that starting role and really make a name for himself or a career out of it. And then he got hurt last year and stuff, and now he's a free agent. To me, I just really like him because he's dependable. He reminds me of the Bags and the Dresslers and the fan, all of these guys of the past, these slot backs that have come in that have just always been a safety blanket and been dependable. But for whatever reason, has just never, ever got his shot, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I hope if he does come back to the Riders, I hope that his role going forward is bigger than it has been in the past.
I agree with you. And I in talking to the quarterbacks, and you know that the Riders went through some injuries, so we did see Shea Patterson play. We did see, the backups come in. But when I talked to them about Pickton, they all had so much confidence in him. Like he was sort of their rock. It was like this, when they talked about Pickton, and it was like, well, it was time for the Pickton play kind of thing. Like it was third down. I needed to throw to a guy that I believed in, and I hit Pickton and we got the first down. It was that kind of discussion. Mm-hmm. So I hear you on that, and getting that opportunity is a big part of it. The other part with Pickton is when you're in year 4, that's really, especially for an offensive guy, I think when you're in year 4, you're really coming into your own as a Canadian. You've gone through the first couple of years, which is like standing in the middle of a freeway. Then you start to really gain some momentum and show what you can do. And then in year 4, you're a 1,000-yard receiver. And that's the question. I mean, if they go after Justin McInnis and get him, how does that change everything? But if Pickton is available, they look at the market, probably a little hometown discount, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. if you can work it, and work on some stuff outside of the game, which I'm sure Pickton does a ton of anyway. But I agree with you, Maz. There's a lot of guys like that sometimes if you put him in the prime spot in the slot, he'd be a 1,000-yard receiver, but he just doesn't get that opportunity.
All right. As always, Suits, we love it. Go do some tampering before Sunday. Go be that guy, that disruptor. Go tamper. Go do your thing before Sunday. And there's no commissioner in the league right now, Suits. Nothing bad can happen to you.
No, that's right. That's a great point. You can tamper all you want. There is no commissioner. You know what I'm going to do, though? The next time I see you at Memories Restaurant, I'm bringing you batteries for that clock over your shoulder, because we got to put some batteries in that baby.
Hey, as one of the double C's said, a broken clock is right twice a day. The rest of this show, not often is it ever.